There is sometimes a tendency to underestimate short stories, but the artistic impact of a work is not related to its length. In fact, Sentry was also discussed by Umberto Eco in his On Ugliness, but we will get to that later. Sentry is a 1954 science fiction short stories by Fredric Brown. Occupying the space of just one page, it is considered a science fiction classic and has appeared in numerous anthologies. Before we talk about the story, let's say a few words about the author. Fredric Brown was an American mystery, fantasy and science fiction writer. He is best known for his humor and his mastery of writing short stories of 1 to 3 pages, often with ingenious plots and surprise endings. An only child, he was orphaned at the age of 15, losing both his mother and his father within a single year. While still a boy, he was hired as factotum at Conjure and Way, an experience from which he would derive his autobiographical novel, The Office, which, while a comic novel about the vicissitudes of an employee of a company that sells miscellaneous stuff, screws, lathes, sandpapers and glitter letterings, has nothing to do with The Office, the series conceived by Ricky Gervais. At least there are no official statements, but he may have read it and been inspired by it. I guess we'll never know. He also worked in a traveling Luna Park, sharing the tent of a mind reader, and it is in such a setting as a Luna Park that he will set what are considered his best mysteries. Finally, he becomes a proofreader for Cuneo Press and later in the Milwaukee Journal, after moving to Milwaukee. Many of his books use the threat of the supernatural or occult before a logical explanation comes in to end the mystery, pretty much as happens in every episode of Scooby-Doo. Many of his short stories are written with a charming style and a rare ability to summarize. In Sentinel, you can see how much he tried to express concepts with as few words as possible. He wanted to be dry, direct, no frills. Moreover, his often light and humorous tone is a pretext for ridiculing beliefs and prejudice about dramatic issues such as war and the arms race. According to his wife, Brown hated writing and would do anything to procrastinate. He would play the flute, he would challenge his friends to a game of chess, he would play with Ming Ta, his Siamese cat. When he had trouble with a story, he would take a long bus ride and sit and think for days. When he finally got home and sat down at the typewriter, he would produce works of various genres: mystery, science fiction, short fantasy, and black comedies. So if you've got writer's block, remember that for him, spending a week on a bus worked. Actually, spending a lot of hours thinking, with the scenery passing in front of your eyes. Maybe it can actually work. At least until you find yourself next to a crying baby. Getting back to Sentinel, this analysis will inevitably end up spoiling it for you. So let me start by telling you where you can read it or listen to it. Listen to it. As I mentioned, it has appeared in many anthologies. In the description you can find the links to 2 short story collections called the Fredric Brown Megapack 1 and 2, each containing about 30 stories. Sentry specifically is found in Megapack 1. You can also find a reading of Sentry by me here on the channel. I will leave you a link in the description for that video. The protagonist of the story is a soldier in an interplanetary war against an alien species. He is in an outpost on an unspecified planet. It is not known if he's alone or if there are other soldiers with him, and he suffers from the hardship caused by war and the hostile environment. He is wet, muddy, hungry and cold, and he has trouble moving due to gravity twice as strong as on his home planet. The environment is illuminated by a blue sun and the ground is swept by a strong wind. As is often the case with military personnel in war, he considers his colleague in other armed force to be more fortunate. In particular, he feels a kind of disdain mixed with envy for the flyboys. But in tens of thousands of years, this part of war hadn't changed. The flyboys were fine with their sleek spaceship and their fancy weapons. When the chips are down, though, it was still the foot soldier, the infantry, that had to take the ground and hold it, foot by bloody foot. He sees his task as the most important, the most risky, and yet the less recognized. There is a little bit of victimhood in here, a little bit of truth, but a little bit of victimhood as well. As is so often the case in war, the Sentry agrees with the official narrative of events, and reflecting on the causes of the outbreak of the war, places all the blame for the conflict on the enemies. He reserves for his own side the innocence of self-defense. And it had been war at sight. They'd shot without even trying to negotiate or to make peace. Now, planet by bitter planet, it was being fought out. At one point, the Sentry sees an alien trying to approach and shoots him, then looked at his corpse with contempt and horror. It is at this moment, in the very last sentence of the story, that we are hit with the twist. Such repulsive creatures they were, with only 2 arms and 2 legs, ghastly white skins, and no scales. In fact, the story is written in such a way that the reader is led to sympathize with and side with the Sentry, only to discover at the very end that the Sentry is an alien soldier that has just shot a human. In fact, Brown's intention is to make the reader question his own perception, his own prejudice, the certainty that he is always on the right side, and to highlight the fact that wrong and right, good and evil, often depends on one point of view. There are 3 themes in this story. Aesthetics. Philosopher and novelist Umberto Eco, in his book On Ugliness, describes Sentry as one of the finest short stories produced by contemporary science fiction, and uses its twist ending as an example of how ugliness and aesthetics are relative to different cultures. Concepts of beauty and ugliness are relative to various historical periods or various cultures, and, to quote Xenophanes of Colophon, but had the oxen or the lion's hands, or could with hands depict a work like men, were beasts to draw the semblance of the gods, the horses would them like to horses sketch, to oxen, oxen, and their bodies make of such a shape as to themselves belong. In the Middle Ages, James of Vitry, in praising the beauty of all the divine works, admitted that probably the Cyclops, who have only 1 eye, are amazed by those who have 2 of them, just as we marvel both at them and at creatures with 3 eyes. Centuries later, this was echoed by Voltaire. Ask a toad what beauty is. He will tell you that it consists of his mate, with her 2 fine round eyes protruding from a small head, with broad flat throat, her yellow belly and brown back. Finally, if we read Fredric Brown's Sentry, one of the finest short stories produced by contemporary science fiction, we see how the relationship between normal and monstrous, acceptable and horrific, may be turned on its head depending on the point of view, whether it is we who are looking at the space monster, or whether it is the space monster who is looking at us. Expansionism. By the end of the story, the reader will feel confused, his or her allegiance split between the Sentry, who is not who he or she expected, and the poor man who was killed, but who is described as the aggressor. The social critique is about human belligerence, the evil we are capable of doing in the name of an expansionism that we believe it's our right to exercise by force of arms, without questioning the legitimacy of our actions. The Sentry turns out to be the real alien in our eyes, but we already place the Sentry on the side of reason, and we are inclined to think, of course humans are the real evil, just as we kill, conquer and pollute here on Earth, we would do the same in space, in our eagerness to subjugate every other populations and grab resources for ourselves. This brings us to an inner reflection on how we act here on Earth, here and now. This story has been written in 1954, but it is more than relevant today after exactly 70 years. This brings us to another theme. Once the reader's loyalty has been broken, there is the need to decide which side of the conflict to take. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? And this is an interesting question because we cannot find an answer in the short story. Let's reflect on what Brown tells us through the Sentry's thought. Contact had been made with them near the center of the galaxy. After the slow, difficult colonization of 12,000 planets. This passage makes us realize that the humans and the species to which the Sentry belongs were, after all, doing the same thing, conquering the galaxy planet by planet. It was only a matter of time before the two civilizations come into contact. And it had been war at sight. They shot without even trying to negotiate or to make peace. This is the passage that put the Sentry on the side of good and the humans on the side of evil. However, reflecting on it, this information is given to us from the perspective of the Sentry, a simple infantry soldier. We cannot take his words as gold. If we had the perspective of the person who was killed, would he have said that it was the others who shot first? Wars are also fought through the narrative about them, each side trying to make the other look guilty in the eyes of the public. You only need to have followed even a little bit of the debate about the war going on right now in our planet to realize that. So the likelihood that the Sentry is aligned with the narrative being made about the war on his side is very high, and this must lead us to doubt about his own thoughts. The final conclusion is that we cannot know who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. We do not even know if there is a good side or a bad side. The most likely thing, as often is the case, is a coincidence of errors and that both sides are to blame. We do not have reliable data to make a decision, and this should make us think in our daily lives. Based on what we make certain decisions, based on what we take one side or the other of a conflict, and can help us identify narratives that tell some events while hiding others. Through these themes, aesthetic, expansionism, and conflict narratives, Sentinel teaches us in just a half page how to be better people.